gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little.
Conformity is going along with the group, modeling your responses after what the group is doing exactly what the crowd, what everybody else is performing.
Experiment is not a public opinion poll. It examines behavior under the pressure of social forces, as the experiment of Solomon Asch reveals.
Why bother mentioning conformity at all? Well, we're living in an age of social media, and that sort of breeds conformity. It's like a hive mind kind of thing. So we're dealing with this in a totally new and novel way, and we kind of want to get ahead of it. Now, the Asch Conformity experiment, I'm sure you've heard about it. Even if you haven't, I'm going to describe it to you. Here we go. So basically, in the 1950s, this man called Solomon Asch took a bunch of college students, put them in a room. There's all male because this is the 50s, and that's who go to college. Come on, what do we need broads in college for? What are they going to do? Read a book and make eggs? You don't need broads there. Let's be silly. This is silly. Anyway, he took these men, put them at a table, and 8 of them were actors. Was it 8? Let me go over this paper. 7 to 9. 7 to 9. So it was between 7 and 9. So let's say there's 9 at the table. 8 of them are actors, and 1 of them is the test subject. And he showed them these lines. I'll put it up on the screen because this is too small for you to see. You're not going to get any use out of this, so I'm going to put it up on the screen. And he showed them these lines. So one line was, let's say, this big. And then they had to match the line up with these 3 other lines. So which line is most like this line? Simple enough question. In fact, when he asked that question initially, only 1% got it wrong. They all answered correctly. Well, this line looks to be about 3 inches. Let's say B is closest to 3 inches. I'm going to go with B. Okay. Nearly everyone got it right. Everyone's eyes worked. But that's not the experiment. The experiment was, would they stick to their answer once everybody else started saying that, you know what? Actually, the answer is A. Yeah, it looks to be about 4.5 inches. We know how long things are. We can sum things up by looking at them and saying, this is X length, this is whatever. It's kind of like an instinct that we have. So when these 8 people were saying, no, it looks to be about 4.5 inches or whatever, deliberately lying to see if they could get this person to change their answer, a lot of them did. Now, if you've heard about this study, you may think that everyone changed their answer, that everybody conformed. Simply is not true. In fact, of the questions asked, 63%, so about 2/3 of the questions asked, 2/3 answered correctly. However, asterisks. However, 75% of respondents answered incorrectly at least once. So that's where we might be hearing the misinterpretation of this, which says that most people will conform most of the time. That simply isn't true. Most people will conform some of the time. That's the truth. It's been interpreted to explain why people join cults, why people go along with groupthink, why. And it's been misinterpreted. Basically, Bob Marley got it right. You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Now, who didn't they fool? There was a quarter who never answered wrong. These are the most difficult people. You might think, oh, I would be one of these difficult people. But can you imagine having to live with this person? You can't deal with these people. Everyone has one of them in their life. I might be the one in somebody else's life. We'll have to ask my sister about that. But yeah, there are people who will never go against their instinct. They will never go against their own opinion for the crowd. And God bless these people, because yes, they're difficult. It's probably impossible to be roommates with them or be in a relationship with them. They're never going to give in. However, you can also trust them to do the correct thing. Say the right thing, but the correct thing. So God bless these people. Now, as far as the other 75%, what was their excuse? You know what 3 inches is. Why are you pretending it's 4.5 inches? Why are you pretending it's 1 inch? Huh? Explain yourselves, sirs. We all know they were sirs because only men were allowed in college, obviously. One interesting thing to note on the people who never conformed, who always went with what was right. So it's not that these people never doubted themselves, because they did doubt themselves. Some of them doubted themselves. He says here, the most significant fact about them was not the absence of responsiveness to the majority, but a capacity to recover from doubt and to reestablish their equilibrium. So just calm yourself. Exhale. It's going to be okay. Say what you have to say. The worst thing they can do is laugh at you. Now, others who acted independently came to believe that the majority was correct in its answer, but they continued their dissent on the simple grounds that it was their obligation to play the game as they saw it. Can we shout out these people? I know a lot of them have probably passed by now, but respect to these people. Continue to play the game as they saw it. An obligation. We forget we have obligations now, but yes, we have obligations to be ourselves. And these people, these independent individuals, they never forgot their obligation to be themselves for the sake of the game. Now, among extremely yielding persons, I'll put this on the screen so you don't have to watch me read. These are the extremely yielding persons, not the people who yielded once or twice, humored the group or whatever. These are the people who yielded repeatedly, knowing full well that line is 3 inches long. Why did they yield anyway? They thought that they were wrong and that the group must be right. Some others thought that they didn't want to spoil the results. A lot of them knew that the line was 3 inches long, but at the moment of decision, they went along with the group. So that's that split second thing. That's what we were talking about with B.F. Skinner, with Beyond Freedom and Dignity, where action comes first and then the thought. You remember he says that it's the action. What would he say? He said, we're scared because we run. We don't run because we're scared. Now, I don't think that applies to everybody. You've seen that video. You know I don't think that applies to everybody. But for these particular people, their action was to agree with the group, even though they knew they shouldn't have at the moment of decision. Also, these people didn't even know they were doing it. All the yielding subjects underestimated the frequency with which they conformed. Basically, these people had low self-esteem. They didn't believe in what they had to offer. They didn't believe that what they had to offer was of any value to the group. So they just went along with it. They said, well, maybe I don't understand the directions. Maybe they're smarter than me. This is a shame. So what else did we discover from this paper? What else did we figure out? Well, it doesn't really matter if it's 9 people. If it's 9 people, if it's 15 people, what matters is that it's more than 3 people. So if there's one person saying something crazy, you're like, you know what, this guy, he's a little off. If there's 2, you're like, maybe they got a point. If there's 3 or more, then they go along with the group. And that seems to be the magic number. 3 or more. Also, for all of you out there who think that you don't matter, who think that the voice of a single person does not matter, you're wrong. That is your low self-esteem showing through. See? Because the voice of a single person does matter. He found a truthful partner. So if with these 9 people, there was the subject, and then there was one other person who was there to tell the truth, also an actor, they're all actors. If there was one other person, the subject was more likely to say, you know what? It does look like it's 3 inches. It doesn't matter if 7 of the 9 are saying, no, that line is 4.5 inches. If there was one person saying, no, that line is 3 inches, then the test subject was more likely to say what he knew, which was that line is 3 inches. I know it. Okay. Now, there was also a camaraderie formed with this person. So they wouldn't think, this is not the best friend. But when he interviewed the subjects later and asked them to describe this truthful partner, they described him with warm adjectives. He said he was a good person, he was a friend, this, and that. So the truthful partner is key. Other notes is that when they had another person, when they had this truthful partner in, if this person were to then desert and then go with the group and then say, you know what, I thought that line was 3 inches, but it looks like 4.5. Now, the test subject would go back to saying, you know what, you're right, it is 4.5. So they call this the deserter effect. The deserter effect. So they call this the deserter effect. So once that truthful partner deserts, that person will follow him unconsciously. The whole time, the test subject didn't say it was because of the truthful partner that they changed their opinion. They're like, I would have done it anyway, which we see from the results is just not true. Regardless. Now, they also had an extremist dissenter. So let's say the line is 3 inches, and there's this wild card in there. He's an actor as well. This wild card in there, and he's saying, you know what, that line is 1 inch. Well, it's so absurd. That is so absurd. But when there was that extremist in there, the test subject was most likely to give the correct answer. Most likely. So that extremist actually increased accuracy, even though the extremist was so inaccurate. Crazy, huh? Can you fix your collar, please? You look ridiculous. Hold for wardrobe. Anyway, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, I can't tell the difference between a line that's 3 inches and a line that's 4.5 inches by looking at it. First and foremost, you can, but that's beside the point. Now, they ran the experiment where one line was 1 inch and the other line was 7 inches. There was a massive difference. But still, some people agreed with the group, even though it's absurd to agree at this point. We can see it's a little dot, and this is a big line. But they still agreed. Low self-esteem. Low self-esteem. It really does come down to low self-esteem. Second guessing yourself. Not wanting to displease the group. Not wanting to be humiliated, unfortunately. Just be humiliated. Who cares? You're not going to see these people again. Whatever. So that was the Asch Conformity experiment. And it did find, unfortunately, that people do conform. And most people will conform some of the time. A few people, you're not going to get them to do anything you don't want them to do. And God bless these people. But that was a quarter of the people. A quarter of the people never conformed. But the other 75%, they did, at least some of the time. However, for the sum total of questions, 2/3 of the questions were answered correctly, despite the social pressure. So that should give you hope that, yes, people can be goofy, but at the end of the day, they can be made to see reason. And they will even speak up for themselves. You're like, what about that third? That third is really worrying. That third that's looking at a 1 inch line and a 7 inch line being like, yeah, you know what? That's the same. That's concerning. But what can we do about those people? Now, I have some questions looking back on this 65 years later. No, 67 years later. Ooh. Looking back on this 67 years later, I have some questions. So if these people were threatened with physical harm or loss of a job or something like that, would more people have conformed? Because really what they were threatened with was just humiliation, being laughed at by the group, which, whatever. Now we see people threatened with, loss of a job, loss of their home, inability to make a living and take care of their families. I suspect that would have caused a lot more conformity. It's scary to think that you can threaten people with just about nothing and they'll go along with things, but what are you going to do? Complain? I know what you're thinking. You're in the audience like, but Maya, what if I'm one of these people? Well, 3 out of 4 chance that we're all one of these people. It's unfortunate, but when you're looking at these numbers, you got to think, what if that's me? Well, here's some steps you can take. You've already taken one step, is that you've watched this video, so you're aware of this. You're prepared should it ever happen. The next step that you can take is more simple. Chances are you're not going to be called into another conformity study, although they've done this study many times and the results hold up. Now, when they did this experiment on Dateline in 1997, the results held up. However, a more formal survey was conducted by Bond and Smith, 1996. They found 133 replications of the Asch experiment in 17 countries. An analysis of U.S. studies found that conformity has declined since the 1950s, they reported. This is in contrast to the Dateline results. The researchers used results from 3 surveys to play each country on a dimension of individualism-collectivism. Collectivist countries, those where group actions are encouraged or enforced from above, tended to show higher levels of conformity than individual countries. Okay, that's to be expected. Now, let's say you find yourself in this situation. It's not an experiment. It's a real-world thing. Well, what do? First and foremost, you don't give them any money, because this is an age-old con. Don't give them any money. Don't give them anything of value. A lot of young girls have been manipulated by tactics such as these, and they've been put into humiliating situations. Don't get pimped out. I'm trying to be polite, but it is what it is. And you can get pimped out in a figurative way too, so this advice is for everyone. If you suspect that you are in a room where everybody is working against you, actually, this happened here. The people who said, hey, are y'all conspiring against me? It seems like y'all met up and decided to do this. Asch stopped the experiment. Now, if you're in a situation like this and you're looking around and you're like, are all these people conspiring against me? You know, your physical well-being may be at risk. So you might not want to call them out immediately, but you can joke around about it. You could be like, you know what? If I didn't know any better, I'd think that y'all had it out for me. Did you all plan this before? This is funny. Now, if you don't want to do that, if you don't even want to go that far, you could just be easy about it. You could say something like, I might be wrong. Y'all probably right. And I'm probably going to look stupid by saying this, but I don't agree. And if you say it, you might be the truthful partner, and somebody else may get strength off of what you've just said. So keep that in mind. Anyway, the point of all that whole long spiel, is that people do conform, but not as much as they're making you believe. Subscribe.